Part 1. The day the sky burned, Admiral Zethros stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched the blue planet grow larger on the view screen. He had conquered 47 worlds in his long career, and this one would be the easiest of them all. The intelligence reports were clear. The species called humans had barely reached their own moon. They had no fleet, no orbital defenses, and no idea that 300 warships were about to descend upon them. "What a beautiful world," his second-in-command said. "It will make a fine addition to the Empire." Zethros nodded slowly. The Valkyrie Empire had ruled this region of space for over 1,000 years. They had crushed every species that stood against them. The humans would be no different. They would resist for a few hours, maybe a day, and then they would surrender like all the others. "Begin the assault," Zethros commanded. The fleet opened fire, 6,000 miles below. In Houston, Texas, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price was drinking his morning coffee when every alarm in the building started screaming. He spilled hot coffee on his shirt as he jumped to his feet. Around him, dozens of technicians were shouting and pointing at their screens. "What the hell is happening?" Daniel demanded. A young woman named Sophie ran up to him with terror in her eyes. "Sir, we have multiple impacts across Europe and Asia. Major cities are reporting massive explosions. We counted at least 200 objects entering the atmosphere in the last 3 minutes. Daniel felt his blood turn cold. He had trained for many scenarios in his 20 years of service, but nothing like this. He grabbed the emergency phone and called the Pentagon. On the other side of the world, the city of Berlin was burning. Valkyrie weapons had struck government buildings, military bases, and communication centers with surgical precision. The same scene played out in Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, and dozens of other cities. In the first hour alone, 11 million people died. President Catherine Walsh was rushed to Air Force One within minutes of the first strike. She was a former Marine general, a woman who had seen combat in 3 wars, but even she was shaken by what she was hearing. A military advisor spoke in rapid, clipped sentences, delivering news that got worse with every passing moment. "Madam President," her chief of staff said, "we need to consider the possibility that this is an extinction-level event." Catherine looked out the window at the smoke rising from Washington in the distance. Her jaw tightened. "Get me General Cole on a secure line. It's time to wake up Prometheus." Deep beneath the Nevada desert, in a facility that appeared on no map, General Nathan Cole received the call he had been waiting for his entire career. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands, and he had spent the last 15 years preparing for exactly this moment. "Prometheus is a go," the president said. "Show them what we've been hiding." Cole ended the call and turned to face his command staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a drill. Activate all sites. Launch when ready." The truth was something that would have shocked the world if they had known. Humanity had discovered alien technology 37 years ago. A crash ship had been found on the dark side of the moon in 1986, and every major government had agreed to keep it secret. They had spent decades studying it, understanding it, and building their own versions of it. The public knew nothing. The aliens knew even less. In Nevada, Alaska, Switzerland, and the Gobi Desert, massive doors began to open. Underground hangars that had been built in absolute secrecy revealed their contents. Sleek warships, powered by fusion reactors and armed with particle beam weapons, rose into the sky for the first time. Admiral Zethros received the first strange report 20 minutes after the initial attack. His ground forces in Germany were meeting unexpected resistance. Human soldiers were using weapons that cut through Valkyrie armor like it was made of paper. Aircraft that matched Valkyrie fighters in speed were rising from hidden locations across the planet. "That is impossible," Zethros said. "Check your sensors again." His sensor officer looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, We are detecting massive energy signatures from beneath the planet's surface. They are everywhere. There are hundreds of them. Captain Scott Morrison climbed into the cockpit of his ship, the USS Defiant, and strapped himself in. He was 34 years old, and he had trained for this day since he was recruited out of flight school at 22. No one in his family knew what he really did for a living. They thought he flew cargo planes for the Air Force. "All ships, this is Morrison," he said into his comm system. "We are launching in 60 seconds. Our mission is simple. We are going to make these bastards regret the day they pointed their weapons at Earth." 53 ships rose from the Pacific Ocean, water streaming off their hulls as they climbed toward the stars. They flew in perfect formation, their pilots the best humanity had to offer, their weapons charged and ready, on the ground. Colonel Lisa Bennett led her Special Forces team through the burning streets of Frankfurt. She was a small woman with short brown hair and cold blue eyes. Her team, called Shadow Company, had trained for years to fight enemies that weren't human. Now they finally had their chance. "Contact ahead," her sergeant whispered. 6 hostiles moving in formation. Lisa raised her hand, signaling her team to spread out. The Volcari soldiers moved through the rubble with confidence, their weapons raised, expecting no real resistance. They never saw the humans hiding in the shadows, until it was too late. The fight lasted 8 seconds. Lisa stood over the bodies and checked her ammunition. "Command, this is Shadow Company. 6 hostiles down. Moving to secondary objective." Admiral Zethros watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. His fleet was taking losses. His ground forces were being pushed back. The humans, who should have been primitive and helpless, were fighting with a fury and skill that defied everything he knew. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." President Walsh's face appeared on the view screen. Her eyes were hard and filled with cold anger. "Admiral Zethros," she said, "you came to our world without warning. You killed millions of our people. You thought we would be easy prey." She paused, and her voice dropped to something that sounded almost like a growl. "You were wrong, and now you are going to pay for every single life you have taken. This is not a negotiation. This is a promise." The transmission ended. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Admiral Zethros felt something he had never experienced before. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was fear. Part 2. The wolves awakened. 2 days had passed since the attack began, and the war had changed in ways that Admiral Zethros could not understand. He sat alone in his command chamber, staring at casualty reports that should have been impossible. 41 ships lost. 60,000 ground troops dead or missing. The humans had not only survived the initial assault, they had pushed back with devastating force. General Nathan Cole stood in the heart of Site 7, surrounded by screens showing battles across the globe. His people worked without rest, coordinating strikes, managing supply lines, and directing the counterattack that was slowly turning the tide. He had not slept in 50 hours, but he felt more alive than he had in years. "General," Major Amanda Torres called out, "the Pacific Fleet is reporting visual contact with the enemy flagship." Cole walked over to her station and looked at the tactical display. 53 human warships were closing in on the Volcari command vessel. It was time to cut off the head of the snake. Captain Scott Morrison gripped his controls as the USS Defiant streaked through space toward the enemy fleet. Around him, his fellow pilots flew in tight formation, their ships moving as one. They had trained together for years, learning to fight and fly as a single unit. Now, all that training was about to be tested. "All ships, weapons free," Morrison said calmly. "Pick your targets and make every shot count." The human fleet opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced out across the darkness, striking Volcari warships with deadly accuracy. The enemy vessels tried to return fire, but the human pilots were too fast, too unpredictable. They did not fight in the neat formations that the Valkyrie expected. They swooped and dived and attacked from every angle, never giving the enemy a moment to recover. Morrison locked onto a Valkyrie cruiser and pulled the trigger. His particle beam punched through the enemy's shields and tore into its hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the ship's surface as it began to break apart. "Splash one," Morrison reported. Moving to next target. On the ground, the fighting was even more brutal. Colonel Lisa Bennett crouched behind a broken wall in what used to be a shopping center in Munich. Her team had been fighting for 18 hours straight, and they were all running low on ammunition. But they could not stop. The Valkyrie had landed a large force nearby, and someone had to hold them back. "Sergeant Davis," Lisa whispered. "How many do you count?" The big man next to her peered through his scope. "At least 40 coming up the main road. Another 20 trying to flank from the east." Lisa nodded and checked her weapon. The odds were bad, but she had faced worse. "We hold this position, no matter what." The Valkyrie soldiers advanced with confidence. They were tall creatures, nearly 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms. They had conquered dozens of worlds and had never lost a ground campaign. But they had never fought humans before. The first wave walked straight into an ambush. Lisa's team opened fire from hidden positions, cutting down a dozen aliens before they could react. The survivors scattered for cover, but the humans were already moving, shifting positions, appearing where the Valkyrie did not expect them. Private Jake Miller was only 22 years old. He had joined the army because he wanted to help people, and now he found himself fighting creatures from another world. He moved through the rubble like a ghost, his rifle ready, his heart pounding but his hands steady. A Valkyrie soldier appeared around the corner, and Jake fired twice. The alien fell. "Keep moving," Lisa's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Don't give them time to regroup." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, all 60 Valkyrie soldiers were dead. Lisa's team had lost 2 of their own. She knelt beside the bodies of her fallen soldiers and said a quiet prayer. Then she stood up, reloaded her weapon, and led her team toward the next objective. Back in space, the tide was turning even faster. Admiral Morrison's fleet had destroyed or disabled 23 enemy vessels in the first engagement. The Valkyrie flagship had taken heavy damage and was retreating toward Mars with what remained of its escort. Commander Sarah Webb commanded the USS Ranger, one of the fastest ships in the human fleet. She was 31 years old with red hair and freckles, and she flew her ship like it was an extension of her own body. She had been chasing a damaged Valkyrie destroyer for the last 20 minutes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Come on," she muttered, watching her targeting computer. "Just a little closer." The enemy ship tried to turn, exposing its weakened port side. Sarah smiled and pulled the trigger. Her weapons found their mark, and the Valkyrie destroyer exploded in a ball of fire. "That's for Chicago," she said quietly. On Earth, the news of the counterattack spread quickly. People who had been hiding in shelters emerged to watch human aircraft streak across the sky. They saw the strange, beautiful ships that had appeared from nowhere, and they began to understand that their governments had been preparing for this day. For a very long time, President Walsh addressed the world from a secure location. Her face was tired but determined. "Citizens of Earth," she said, "I know you have many questions. I know you are afraid. But I want you to know that we are fighting back. We have capabilities that were kept secret for your protection, and now those capabilities are being used to defend our home. We will not surrender. We will not give up. And we will make the enemy pay for every drop of human blood they have spilled." Admiral Zethros watched the human broadcast from his damaged flagship. His wounds had been treated, but his pride was beyond repair. He had been so confident, so certain of victory. Now his fleet was scattered, his ground forces were being destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. His aide approached nervously. "Admiral, the High Council demands a status report. They want to know why the conquest is taking so long." Zethros laughed bitterly. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we made a terrible mistake. Tell them we attacked a species that does not know how to quit." He turned back to the view screen, watching the blue planet that had become his nightmare. "They were supposed to be primitive," he said to no one in particular. "They were supposed to be easy. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a human pilot was hunting for him." Zethros could feel it. The predator had become the prey, and there was nothing he could do about it. The wolves of Earth had awakened, and they were hungry for blood. Part 3. The price of Hybris 2 weeks had passed since the invasion began, and the war had completely changed. The Valkyrie, who had expected a quick conquest, found themselves fighting for survival. Their fleet had been pushed back to Mars. Their ground forces on Earth were surrounded and cut off. And every day, humanity grew stronger. Dr. Kevin Marshall had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the attack. He led a team of scientists in a secret laboratory beneath MIT, working around the clock to understand and improve the alien technology they were capturing. Every downed Valkyrie ship provided new secrets. Every piece of alien hardware helped them understand their enemy better. "Look at this," Kevin said to his assistant, a young woman named Rachel. He pointed to a diagram on his screen. "Their shields work by cycling through different energy frequencies. If we can match the cycle and hit them at exactly the right moment, their shields become useless." Rachel studied the data with wide eyes. "Can we actually do that?" Kevin smiled for the first time in days. "Give me 3 more days, and we'll find out." On the front lines, the fighting continued without pause. Colonel Lisa Bennett had become something of a legend among the troops. Her shadow company had killed more Valkyrie soldiers than any other unit, and she showed no signs of slowing down. But the war was taking its toll on everyone. Private Jake Miller sat in a ruined church somewhere in Poland, cleaning his weapon by candlelight. He had killed 17 aliens in the last 2 weeks. Each face haunted him when he closed his eyes. He wondered if he would ever be the same person he was before all this started. "You okay, kid?" Sergeant Davis asked, sitting down next to him. Jake shook his head slowly. "I used to want to be a teacher, you know? I was going to help kids learn to read. Now I spend my days killing things from another planet." Davis put a heavy hand on his shoulder. "We all had different plans. But right now, the only thing that matters is keeping our people safe. You can go back to being a teacher when this is over. But first, we have to win." In space, Admiral Morrison had established a forward base on the moon. Human ships came and went constantly, launching raids on Valkyrie positions and returning to resupply. The enemy had been pushed back, but they were still dangerous. Their remaining fleet of over 200 ships was gathered near Mars, waiting for reinforcements from home. Commander Sarah Webb walked into the briefing room and took her seat. She had been flying combat missions for 14 days straight, and exhaustion showed in her eyes. But when Morrison began speaking, she focused completely. "We have a problem," Morrison said, pointing to a holographic map. "Intelligence reports indicate that a Valkyrie reinforcement fleet is on its way. 300 fresh ships will arrive in approximately 4 weeks. If they reach Mars, we'll be outnumbered again." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. All their victories, all their sacrifices, could be undone in a single stroke. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. Morrison's jaw tightened. "We don't let them reach Mars. We take the fight to them before the reinforcements arrive." Meanwhile, Colonel Bennett's team achieved a major breakthrough. During a raid on a Valkyrie command post near Moscow, they captured a high-ranking intelligence officer. The alien was terrified when they brought him in for questioning, expecting to be tortured and killed. Instead, they gave him medical treatment and hot food. Why? The officer asked through a translation device. Why do you not kill me? Lisa looked at him with cold eyes. Because we're not like you. We don't murder prisoners. Now, you can either help us or you can spend the rest of this war in a cell. Your choice. The officer chose to help. He provided access codes to the Volcari military network, and within hours, human hackers had infiltrated their communication systems. What they found changed everything. The Volcari Empire was not as strong as it appeared. They had stretched their military across dozens of conquered worlds, and rebellion was brewing everywhere. Zethros' fleet represented nearly a quarter of their total strength. The attack on Earth was supposed to be a show of power, a demonstration to keep their subjects in line. Instead, it had become a disaster. President Walsh called an emergency meeting with world leaders. They gathered via secure video link, their faces showing the strain of 2 weeks of war. We have an opportunity, Walsh said. The Volcari are weaker than we thought. Their empire is held together by fear, and that fear is starting to crack. If we strike now, if we hit them hard enough, we can break them completely. The British Prime Minister leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? Walsh took a deep breath. I'm proposing we go on the offensive. Not just to defend Earth, but to take the war to them. We hit their staging base at Proxima before the reinforcements arrive. We show the entire galaxy that the Volcari can be beaten. The room erupted in discussion. Some leaders were cautious, worried about overextending their forces. Others were eager to strike back. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Operation Thunderstrike was approved. Dr. Marshall delivered on his promise 2 days later. His team had developed a weapon that could cut through Volcari shields like they weren't there. The technology was immediately distributed to every ship in the fleet. Admiral Zethros, hiding with his damaged fleet near Mars, received word of the human plans through a spy satellite. He felt sick as he read the report. The humans were not going to wait for the reinforcements to arrive. They were coming for him. Sir, his aide said nervously, what are your orders? Zethros stared at the tactical display for a long moment. He thought about all the worlds he had conquered, all the species he had crushed beneath his heel. He had never faced an enemy like this. He had never imagined that such an enemy could exist. We hold our position, he finally said, and we pray that the reinforcements arrive in time. But deep in his heart, he knew the truth. The humans were coming, and nothing was going to stop them. The price of hubris was about to be paid in full. Part 5. The New Dawn. 3 months had passed since the day the sky burned over Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Volcari Empire, which had ruled dozens of worlds for over 1,000 years, was gone. In its place, something new was being born. Ambassador Christopher Lane stood at the entrance to the Galactic Assembly, a vast chamber filled with representatives from 73 different species. Some were tall and thin, others short and covered in scales. Some had 4 arms, others had none. But they all had one thing in common. They had all suffered under Volcari rule, and they had all been freed by humanity. Chris took a deep breath and walked to the speaking platform. He was 45 years old, a former diplomat who had spent his career negotiating trade deals and resolving minor disputes. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. He was about to address the entire galaxy on behalf of his species. Representatives of the Assembly, he began, his voice strong and clear. 3 months ago, an empire that had terrorized this region of space for 1,000 years made a fatal mistake. They attacked a small blue planet called Earth. They thought we would be easy prey. They thought we would surrender within hours. He paused, looking around at the assembled faces. They were wrong. The journey to this moment had been written in blood and sacrifice. After the victory at Proxima, human forces had advanced through Valkyrie space, liberating world after world. They had been joined by resistance fighters from a dozen species who had been waiting for someone to stand up to their oppressors. Former slaves became soldiers. Former victims became warriors. The final battle at the Valkyrie homeworld had lasted 3 days. Admiral Morrison had led the combined liberation fleet against the last defenders of the Empire. The fighting was brutal and costly. Humanity lost 112 ships and over 8,000 lives. But in the end, the Valkyrie High Council had surrendered. Morrison had accepted their surrender personally. He had stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship and looked at the leaders who had ordered the attack on his world. He could have destroyed them. He could have taken revenge for every life they had taken. But he did not. "We are not like you," he had told them. "We do not murder those who surrender. We do not destroy those who cannot fight back." That is the difference between humanity and the Valkyrie. Remember it. Now, standing before the Galactic Assembly, Chris continued his speech. "We did not ask for this war," he said. "We were minding our own business, exploring our own solar system, dealing with our own problems. We had no interest in conquest or empire. But when the enemy came for us, we discovered something about ourselves. We discovered that we would not break. We would not surrender. And we would fight until the very last one of us was gone." A murmur went through the chamber. Many of the representatives had seen humans fight. They had witnessed the terrible fury that this seemingly primitive species could unleash. Some were afraid of what humanity might do with its new power. Chris seemed to read their thoughts. "I know that some of you are worried," he said. "You have seen what we can do in war, and you wonder what we will do in peace. Will we become the new empire? Will we rule you as the Valkyrie did? Will we demand tribute and obedience and crush any who resist?" He shook his head slowly. "No, that is not who we are. We did not fight to become conquerors. We fought because we had to. We fought to protect our home, and then we fought to free those who could not free themselves. But now the fighting is over. Now it is time to build something new." He spread his hands, including everyone in the gesture. "We offer you partnership, not dominion. We offer you friendship, not fear. We offer you a chance to build a galaxy where every species is free, where every world governs itself, where no empire ever rises to enslave others again." The assembly fell silent. Then, slowly, one representative began to clap. Then another. Then another. Within moments, the entire chamber was filled with applause. On Earth, the reconstruction continued. Cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt, better than before. Memorials were being erected to honor the fallen. Schools had added new subjects to their courses, teaching children about the galaxy that they now knew they were part of. Dr. Kevin Marshall received the Nobel Prize for his work on shield harmonics. He gave a short speech thanking his team and then went back to his laboratory, where 100 new projects were waiting for his attention. Colonel Lisa Bennett wrote a book about her experiences during the war. It became required reading at military academies across the Allied worlds. She retired from active service and opened a training school for young soldiers, teaching them the skills that had kept her alive through the darkest days. Admiral Morrison also retired. He had spent too many years fighting, and he was tired. He took a position teaching strategy at the newly established Earth Defense Academy, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. Private Jake Miller went back to school and became a teacher, just as he had always planned. He taught reading and writing to children in a rebuilt school in his hometown. Some days, he still woke up from nightmares about the war. But every day, he saw the faces of his students, and he remembered why he had fought. And in a small town in Nebraska, A young girl named Grace stood in her backyard and looked up at the stars. She was 10 years old, and she had watched the war unfold on television screens and through conversations between frightened adults. But now the fear was gone. Now there was only wonder. "Mom," she called out, "I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I want to see the galaxy." Her mother smiled and put an arm around her shoulders. "Then you will, sweetheart. You absolutely will." The Volcari had thought they were attacking primitives. They had expected easy prey, a quick conquest, another trophy for their empire. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrible. They had reminded humanity what it was capable of when pushed to the edge. Earth remembered. Earth endured that, and now, as the sun rose on a new day and a new era, Earth would lead the galaxy into a future that was brighter than anyone had ever imagined. The war was over. The new dawn had begun. Part 4. Striking the heart, the human fleet gathered in the shadow of Jupiter, hidden from enemy sensors by the giant planet's massive electromagnetic field. 327 warships floated in silent formation, their crews making final preparations for the most dangerous mission in human history. They were going to attack the Volcari staging base at Proxima, and everyone knew that many of them would not be coming back. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant. Looking out at the fleet he was about to lead into battle. He'd been a pilot for 12 years and a commander for 3 more. He had trained for war his entire adult life. But nothing could have prepared him for this moment. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "all ships report ready for departure." Morrison nodded slowly. He picked up the microphone and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Morrison," he said, his voice steady and calm. 18 days ago, an enemy came to our home without warning. They burned our cities. They killed our families. They thought we would break. They thought we would surrender. They thought wrong." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today, we carry the fight to them. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not for conquest, but for freedom. Every species in this galaxy needs to know that there is a price for aggression, and humanity is here to collect that price. We fight for those who died. We fight for those who survived. We fight for every generation that will come after us." He took a deep breath. "All ships, prepare to jump. Good luck and Godspeed." The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness of space. Lieutenant Tyler Brooks was a tactical officer aboard the USS Liberty. He was 26 years old, and this was his first real combat mission. His hands were shaking as he watched the jump countdown on his screen. In just a few minutes, he would either be a hero or a corpse. "Nervous?" Commander Sarah Webb asked from the pilot's seat. Tyler tried to smile. "Is it that obvious?" Sarah laughed softly. "Everyone's nervous before their first big fight. The trick is to use that fear. Let it make you sharp. Let it keep you alive." The countdown reached 0, and the universe twisted around them. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace, directly above the Volcari staging base at Proxima. For a moment, everything was still. Then the battle began. The Volcari had fortified their position with 80 warships and dozens of orbital defense platforms. It was the strongest defensive position in their empire, outside of their homeworld. They were confident that no enemy could break through. They were wrong. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "All ships, engage at will. Wolfpack tactics. Don't give them time to coordinate." The human fleet split into dozens of small groups and attacked from every direction at once. Volcari commanders shouted orders, trying to organize their defense, but the humans were too fast, too unpredictable. Ships that should have been easy targets twisted and dived and struck from impossible angles. Lieutenant Brooks watched his screen as the USS Liberty dove toward an enemy cruiser. Commander Webb flew the ship like she was born in the cockpit, dodging enemy fire with moves that seemed to defy physics. Tyler locked onto the cruiser's shield generator and fired. The new weapons worked perfectly. Dr. Marshall's frequency modulator cut through the Valkyrie shields like they weren't there. The cruiser's generator exploded, leaving the ship defenseless. A second later, another human vessel finished it off. One down, Webb reported. Moving to next target. Admiral Zethros commanded the defense from his flagship, the inevitable Dominion. He watched in horror as his carefully planned defensive formation fell apart. Human ships were everywhere, striking and retreating and striking again. His captains were dying faster than he could give orders. "They fight like demons," his tactical officer said, his voice trembling. "They do not follow any known combat patterns." Zethros slammed his fist against his console. "Then make new patterns. Adapt. Do something." But there was nothing to be done. The humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other. They had thousands of years of experience in the art of war. Every tactic, every strategy, every dirty trick that one human mind had ever conceived was now being used against the Valkyrie. The flagship took a direct hit to its engine core. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel as fires broke out on multiple decks. Zethros gave the order to abandon ship just before the reactor went critical. He was barely aboard an escape shuttle when the inevitable Dominion exploded behind him. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Valkyrie staging base was in ruins. 63 of their warships had been destroyed. The rest had surrendered or fled. Humanity had lost 41 ships and over 3,000 lives. But they had won a victory that would echo across the galaxy. But Morrison was not finished. A detachment of 12 ships, led by Captain Nicole Hayes, pushed through the shattered defenses and jumped to the next system. They were not there to fight. They were there to send a message. Nicole was 33 years old with dark skin and sharp eyes. She had lost her brother in the initial attack on Earth, and she carried his photograph in her pocket. Now, she was about to speak for all of humanity. Her face appeared on every communication channel the Valkyrie used, translated into their language by captured software. "People of the Valkyrie Empire," she said, "and all species living under their rule. Earth has defeated the fleet that attacked us. We have destroyed their staging base. And we are coming, not to conquer, not to enslave, but to end the reign of an empire that has caused suffering across the stars." She paused, thinking of her brother. "To those who wish to resist, rise up. To those who fear, take heart. And to the Valkyrie High Council, start running. Humanity does not forgive, and we never forget." The message was received by over 40 inhabited worlds. Species that had lived under Valkyrie rule for generations heard it and felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. Within a week, rebellions had broken out on 12 worlds. The Valkyrie Empire, which had seemed so powerful, was beginning to crumble, and humanity was just getting started.